So I get the joy of introducing the next speaker, who will talk about a topic which is very important and poignant in our society today. I'm going to introduce Joseph shortly. By day, Joseph is a marketing and communications professional, and by night, he's a coach and also someone who facilitates groups, men's groups, and also does some facilitation with charity. And he's going to talk about the broken transition from boys to men. And his talk is essentially about how outdated notions of masculinity are still impacting boys and young men today. And part of his talk, he shares his own journey where he's transitioned from taking up the role of man of the house and what all of that means to supporting young men and boys to defining their own answers in life. So let's give a huge round of applause to Joseph.
Hello, everyone. So, 2 years ago, I was in a classroom of 25 15-year-old boys. And I was running a workshop all about masculinity and what they thought about the associations and stereotypes, what they thought about what being a man was all about. And after a particularly heated discussion about the effect of banter and jokes, one of the boys, completely exasperated with it all, said, "So what kind of man can I be then?" And this neatly sums up much of what I'll talk to you about today. So I'm going to cover 3 different factors. Of course, there are many others, but 3 factors that really impact this transition of boy to man. So before I start, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. So I grew up in a pretty male-dominated household and childhood. I'm the oldest brother of 4 boys, went to an all-boys school, and if you can imagine the most kind of stereotypical male energy, boisterous household, then ours was it. It was toys everywhere. It was arguments. It was punch-ups. It was competition. It was who could be the best. It was balls of all kind flying around everywhere. And it was great. Obviously, it's a certain type of childhood, but I was very lucky about that. And the first sort of factor I'm going to talk to you about today is the man box. So I'm going to start with a bit of a story. So when I was about 10 years old, my dad would often go away for work for a couple of nights a week. And he'd say, "Joseph, you're the man of the house this week. Make sure everyone's all right." And in that moment, I felt great. My dad had given me that trust, that responsibility, that job to do, which as the oldest brother, I really felt I needed and wanted. And I guess as I went through school with my brothers, with male friends, ideas about being a man slowly developed more. We wanted to assert ourselves at school. We wanted the respect of our peers. We wanted to make sure that we were standing up for ourselves, being tough, being resilient, all of these things. But my friends and brothers, we were all carrying around something else too. The man box. Now, the man box is a metaphorical set of societal norms in which men and boys are expected to uphold. And I'm sure you're pretty familiar with them. It's to be strong, it's to be resilient, to be independent, to be the guide, the breadwinner, the leader, the one that doesn't show their emotions, the one that doesn't perhaps let people in as much as they would like. Now, the problem with the man box is that nothing in it is actually inherently bad by itself. But it's when boys and men are expected to just be those things to be a man. Because the pressure to uphold these things is massive, socially, emotionally, physically, and one other reason, but I can't think of it. It's gone from my head. But it's massive. We're expected to be this type of man, this type of masculine figure, but it doesn't work out for all of us. And the man box really needs to be dismantled if all of us men and boys can actually redefine what we want to be like as a man. One great way of doing this is similar to what I was talking about earlier, the workshops, the open discussion, the questions. These are all great ways to sort of pick out exactly how boys and men feel about themselves, what's expected of them, What don't they like about having to live this life potentially that isn't really themselves? But what I found is, and many of you might appreciate this, how hard it is to get men and boys talking about their feelings and emotions, right? It's pretty challenging. But personally, what I found is that doing things side by side is much easier for boys and men to talk about some of these things, because this face-to-face communication is quite pressurized. It's quite confronting and conflicting for men and boys as well. So if we're going to talk about some of this stuff, doing things side by side is a great way to do that, whether it's activities, sport, being in teams, making stuff, playing even video games together, walking, exercising, as long as it's that side by side, which reduces that pressure on boys and men to talk to each other. The second theme that I want to talk to you about that affects this transition of boy to man is literally the online world and the internet. In these workshops that I run, we do a little fun game called a word race. And we line the boys up, and it's a race to write down as many words as possible on a bit of paper that they associate with the word man. And you get all the usual ones: the tall, hairy, muscular, leader, dominant, confident, willies, balls, all of that stuff. But when I ask the boys about some of this stuff, they say things like, well, I don't even know if I believe half of this. It feels like it comes from the outside. It's come from what I've watched or seen or listened to. It doesn't really come from me. And this is important because many of you might have sons or younger brothers or just in touch with young boys. And actually what they see online is pretty worrying these days, because they see polarizing views, they see extreme views, they see expectations that are just so out of reach and so unrealistic that it just makes you feel like crap, really. And I guess the impact of this is they feel that pressure from what they look at every single day on their phones. One way in which boys can kind of get around this is two skills, really. Two skills in which probably all of us here can appreciate when we go online. One is critical thinking. So can you watch something online? Can you watch a kind of questionable video about someone and say, what that guy's saying, I don't actually agree with that. Or why is that guy saying this? Why is he saying it to me? What's the purpose of him saying this in this medium or this channel? So that's a great skill to have, not just for boys who want to just kind of let themselves enjoy social media without that pressure, but it's for adults too. And the second skill that I think is really helpful for boys and young men in this area is just self-awareness. How do you feel when you go online? How do you feel when you scroll through Instagram and see all these kind of extreme views, these videos that seem to get more and more extreme the more you watch them? That's the worrying bit, by the way. I'm just as susceptible to it as they are, to be honest with you. And when I feel a bit crap after spending 10 minutes scrolling on Instagram, I know that, well, what did I get out of that? Absolutely nothing. But this is particularly important for boys and young men who maybe don't have that awareness yet. And the third theme that I want to cover with you today is probably my favorite one, actually. It's the role of role models and community support. And this starts with a story as well. He looks too old to play in this rugby team, the rugby coach shouted at me. Why was that? Because I did look a lot older, because I was losing my hair at 17. The hair was spiraling down the plug hole. I hated bright lights like this. And I dreaded bending down so people could see my bald spot. And at 17, you just want to explore the world more. You want to make friends. You want to plan the next stage in your life. For me, it was university. But losing my hair, kind of looking different, looking maybe a bit weird amongst my peers, that kind of put a handbrake on that. And it really affected my confidence, to be honest, because if you think back to when you were 17, your physical appearance, your hair, the way you looked, it did matter. And I can talk about this now because I'm completely over it. But when you're 17, it's hard. And not long after this, I found myself in the car with my dad a couple of years later. And I'd simply just had enough of this feeling of hiding, because my hair was all over the place, and I was hiding. I was kind of just struggling with kind of coming forward, being really myself, and embracing what I was. And I don't know if many of you maybe had, conversations with your dad, especially the men in this room. I don't know how many of you had emotional conversations with your dad, but I certainly didn't really. But I remember the kind of hot tears forming in my face because I'd simply had enough of just hiding, to be honest, and being fed up with all of this. Why me? Why does this happen to me? And he said, Joseph, this happened exactly the same way for me too, at your age, but I just didn't have the confidence like you do. But trust me when I say this will be one of the best things that ever happens to you, and you'll be way stronger as a result. And I was like, really, Dad? What sort of advice is that? For God's sake. Okay, cool, thanks. But reflecting on this, soon after this, I shaved my hair off like it is now. And in that moment, I became Joseph 2.0. I finally kind of embraced what I looked like, what I felt like, and I could just sort of move on with my life. And by the way, there's great YouTube videos of men shaving their hair off, and it's some of the most wholesome content you can watch because they just have this big smile on their face like, thank God the hair's gone. But this was great because in that moment, my dad was the perfect role model, right? He gave me the advice that I needed at that exact moment at the right time. He shared his experience and he gave me that advice. But not every boy will have that role model, but every boy will face a massive challenge in their life that will test them in a massive way. It's just whether they have that support network around them to make the right decision, to go along the right path, to embrace who they really are and not take up the expectations that are put on them mistakenly. And this brings me on to a question for you now. How many of you would say you have 1 to 2 close friends? Just put your hand up. 1 to 2 close friends. How about 3 to 5? More than 6? Popular, right? But in the UK, 1 in 5 men actually have 0 close friends. And that is someone they can talk to about their finances, their emotions, and their health. And this is important because friendship, fellowship, and a sense of brotherhood amongst men is really, really important, especially for that idea of coming of age, that development of boy to man, but also transformational moments that men go through, not just as a young adult, but all through into their adult life too. And I'm guessing you've all kind of heard of famous films like Stand By Me, Dead Poet Society, all of these kind of coming of age classics. But they're compelling because they cover this transformation of boy to man, of releasing the expectations and embracing who they really are. And I guess the problem is, where do you find these role models? Where do you find this support network? Because everything's online. Everything's somewhat surface level, you could say, or superficial. Where do you get that real meaningful connection, especially for men and boys, where they can be honest with each other, where they get that support when they go through their trials and challenges? Well, in the last 10 years, and this is involved in some of the work that I do, there are more and more initiatives, organizations, groups that really bring men together in amazing ways. Whether it's just talking, doing activities, doing jobs together, going on walks, camping, whatever it is, any moment where they're bringing men together is really, really effective. And a few examples to sort of let you know are Men Tell, Men Speak, Fight or Flight Club, Men's Sheds. I'm sure there are many near where you live, perhaps, where men gather and can support each other and be there for each other and embrace, I guess, everyone's imperfections and embrace perhaps the expectations that they're maybe trying to get rid of or kind of get away from. And I guess I'll finish with this. If we're to help our boys and men to dismantle their man box, then we need to listen. We need to ask open questions. We need to look at what is actually expected of them and what all of you expect from the boys and men in your life too. And if one of them comes to you and says, what kind of man can I be then? Make sure you can say whatever you like. Thank you.
I feel like maybe Jeffrey, you should have followed that, not me. But no, really, really amazing. Really, yeah, poignant. And I think so important to have someone like yourself, Joseph, to get up and have those conversations, start that conversation. And yeah, very brave to just stand and own it. Well done. Big round of applause again. That was amazing.